Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome everybody. Today we are ending chapter 1 of Autobiography. This is our podcast. We're going through the autobiography of a yogi line by line, and we split chapter 1 into 6 parts. And today we are coming to an end. This is the last part of chapter 1. Just going to summarize a little bit what's happening. There's the first story that's going on is between Guruji and his sister Uma, where she has a boil and she treats it with some ointment. Guruji uses that same ointment and then she criticizes him for it, and then he starts using the power of words and doubles the size of her boil the next day and creates a boil of his own. And his mother then scolds him the next day not to use his words in a bad way. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the expression "words like bombs" because that's being used here, and that's very interesting. And then the second part of that section is that they move into a new house, and Guruji immediately finds a place in the house. This is the sacred prayer spot. He puts down the picture of Mother Kali. And he feels very confident that in this spot, whatever he prays for happens. And he puts it to the test in the famous story with 2 balloons, where I think it's again his sister Uma who challenges him, and the 2 balloons, they come his way.
2 kites, Mike.
Is it kites? Oh my God, it's 2 kites. Yeah, because otherwise it would make no sense, right? Because that's like a game that's a game that children in India play often, right? They play with the kites. Yeah.
Right. My wife is playing it right now.
Yes.
Oh.
And then we're going to do a bit of a summary of chapter 1, and we're going to ask our viewers for feedback. And then we can have a bit of a look forward to chapter 2. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go into that story a bit more. So you have I think it's pretty typical. I can relate to this because I have 2 siblings. I have one sister that is just a bit younger than me, and I remember when we were young, we had like our ways to sometimes make fun of each other or like fight over little things. And it's basically Uma, she's like the slightly younger sister to Mechta, I think.
I think his older sister, no?
Isn't Roma his older sister? I thought Ananta.
My elder sister, it says in the text, my elder sister Uma. So Roma must be younger.
Oh wow. Yes. Okay. So I got it wrong. So it's his elder sister Uma, who is so Mechta. Doesn't that mean the third born?
Second eldest brother.
Oh, second eldest brother. Okay, so the sisters, they don't count. Okay.
Well, brother.
second eldest brother.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mechta was Sananda Lal Ghosh, who was the next brother, who'd call Mechta second eldest Mechta.
Because that means older brother. Or
second older brother.
Older brother.
Yeah.
Got it. So basically she has a jar of ointment. She smears it on her forearm because she has a boil and she's treating it with it. They're sitting outside in the courtyard. And then Mechta takes that jar of ointment, puts it on his forearm. And she asks him, "Why are you doing this?" And he replies that he wants to test it because he feels tomorrow morning he will have a boil in that spot. So he wants the ointment to see if it actually works. And then Uma, of course, she listens to this and she goes like, "That's complete nonsense. You're just wasting my ointment and you shouldn't be doing this." And she calls him a liar. And Mechta is he's hurt by that. He doesn't appreciate that at all. And he kind of starts, he wants to prove that what he says is correct. So he he says, your boil tomorrow will be twice the size, and I will have a boil here tomorrow. And they wake up the next morning, and it actually happened like he says. And Uma is, of course, shocked, and she calls Mejda a necromancer, runs to his mother. The mother scolds him to not use his power like this anymore. Chris, were you going to say something about this?
Yeah, it's just kind of funny that if you look back, although they're more children now, right? So you can't analyze it with the same lens as you would if you were an adult, for the things that you might get upset by or react to, or that might actually kind of get under your skin, you know, and as siblings, you might be able to do that very easily with one another. But this is something very close to Guruji's heart, isn't it? Telling the truth, speaking the truth, as we're about to get into. And he later would refuse to talk rather than actually speak untruths, right? So it's which I don't want to go into that story right now, but it is just funny that this is something that really would trigger Yogananda into doing what he did in response to being called a liar. He really does that very, very highly, right? For all the things that maybe some people wouldn't get upset by, this is something close to his heart. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, and we have to say he's quite young at this point. I'm not exactly sure what his age is, but he's probably like, I don't know, is he like 5 or 6 years old, something like that? So I think as a human, that's completely understandable, I would say. Or Priyank?
We don't know exactly how old, but because he's studying a Bengali primer, that would mean that he's pretty young, like 5, as you say.
Yeah, kind of makes sense. It's kind of what a 5-year-old would do, right? The only thing is, if another 5-year-old does that, you wake up in the morning and the boil isn't twice as big. It's just not. It's just he's a special 5-year-old. That's the difference. One thing that's also very interesting is that in the book Mejda, they describe the story in very much the same way as in the Autobiography of a Yogi, and they also say that afterwards this boil just wasn't going away on its own, so they waited for days and weeks, and it wouldn't disappear, and that's why it had to be surgically treated. And maybe that was something that stayed as a reminder not to use words in a negative way. Not that an avatar like Yogananda needed this. Again, I think like his whole life, it's all for his disciples, right? To learn from it. Priyank?
Indeed, that is true. There's a few little bits in this narrative that I'd like to pick up on. Firstly, he says that they were sitting under a neem tree, and then that there were you know, what are they called? There was some animal. There some parrots. Am I reading that right? Is it in this section? The parrots, yeah, eating ripe margosa fruit. So margosa is like a small berry type thing that comes from neem trees. Have you guys heard of neem trees before? Neem.
I heard that Gandhi was eating neem leaves, and that he said that their quality as like a bitter substance is very good for digestion or something.
It's a notable blood cleanser. So I have neem every morning. Neem with ginger powder and other little herbs like that. So it's Indians have it, and generally there's a theory amongst like women, elderly women, you know, stories, that anything that's bitter, the more bitter something is, the better it is for you. So neem is extremely bitter. And there's garela as well. I don't know if you guys have had that. It's a bitter gourd that's really really positive pranic, but it's really, really difficult to eat. And my mum used to make me garela juice. I used to drink that with some salt and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting about the neem. He's throwing in a bit about neem, I think, there, in terms of Ayurveda and its significance, because I think nothing in this book was by accident. So because he didn't need to mention these two things, that it was a neem tree and there are parrots eating the margosa fruit. Parrots are my favorite bird. Interesting that there's parrots, Lauren. Have you seen the parrots around London? The green,
Parakeets.
yeah, the green ones.
Yeah, they're always outside my window.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so cute. Do
yeah.
you know how they got to? They're actually from India, native to India. Do you know how they got to London?
I've heard that someone brought one or two over in like a briefcase or something like that. Like, this may not be true. And then they just, populated and went crazy. Is that true or no?
Spread like crazy. No, the scientists are completely astounded as to how they got here and how they are
really?
surviving so well in a not so tropical climate as there's another theory is that the royal family had a collection of them, like in the before like India partition, and then they like a few got out and then they bred like crazy. Another suggestion is that because of the trade between India and UK, they used to like board the ships. They used to just hang out on the ships and then made their way across one by one, like green migrants. Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. And I also want to point out the cute and ordinary relationship, that very ordinary relationship between the two siblings. My sisters and my relationship was exactly the same. They'd bully me in this way, and yeah, I didn't like it, but that's what it was. Two older sisters I've got. And there's some more deeper things, but Mike, do you want to come back before I talk about the deeper things in that?
Yes, because mine is not deep at all. Mine is I don't want to go on a culinary tangent here, but I wanted to dwell on the bitter stuff a little bit, because oftentimes when I eat Indian food, like especially North Indian food, they serve it with this pickle that is like very bitter. Do you know what that is? Because I look at it sometimes and I'm like, what the hell is that? But it's good. It's like I like it. Do you know what I mean?
It could be many things, but it's most likely mango, to be honest. But they add some various things in it to make it sweet and sour and sometimes bitter and things like that. And then was it round? Is it a very round board?
Yeah, it's a round thing that has like a hard core, but I don't know what it is.
Yes, with seeds. Yep. I've forgotten its name, but yeah, we have that as well.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to pick up on is that he's very, very like capable of predicting the future at a young age, and not just capable. He says it with like a very confident air, and such that it almost suggests that it's not his first such prediction. In fact, that he's confident in that, because he kind of bets Uma, doesn't he? And which would imply that he's very, very much familiar with this ability to predict the future, of his capability, of his ability.
Yeah, I would say though that he hasn't been doing this much. Like that's kind of his beginnings in this lifetime. So that's why like Uma wouldn't be used to him doing things like that. Like probably after this experience, she wouldn't have challenged him that much anymore in a similar way, because she's like, okay, when he says something, it's actually happening. Chris?
Are we saying that he's predicting the future about the boil, or that he, in his words, is manifesting it? Which one? I'm confused.
Well, I think at the start he predicts it, but then because she starts doubting it, so what happens is like he just says that I will. I'm fairly sure I'm going to have one tomorrow. So that I don't think that is like making it happen. That's just seeing events that are to transpire. But then when she challenges him, then he says, by the power of will in me. And then he becomes like this affirmation and the sheer power of the word, because then he uses it in a dark way or a necromantic way. in that he says that then yours is going to be twice the size. He probably could have stopped, but he, as in his childish, youthful way, he probably got a bit cross with his sister for doubting him, and therefore manifested this darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find power of will is a good cue to a section that is in Man's Eternal Quest, where Guruji talks about this. And it's a bit about the question, because a lot of devotees have that, like, should I pray for something material that is for myself, or should I pray for something in my life? Or should I always just go, Guruji, thy will be done, and I don't have to think about anything? And I feel Guruji responds to this in this section. So how about we read that, Chris?
Sure. Willpower is what makes you divine. When you give up using that will, you become a mortal man. Many people say that we should not exercise our will to change conditions, lest we interfere with God's plan. But why would God give us will if we are not to use it? I once met a fanatical man who said he did not believe in using willpower because it developed the ego. You are using a lot of will now to resist me. I replied, you are using it to talk, and you are obliged to use your will to stand or walk or eat or go to movies or even to go to sleep. You will everything you do. Without willpower, you would be a mechanical man. Non-use of this will is not what Jesus meant when he said, not as I will, but as thou wilt. He was demonstrating that man must learn to bend his will, which is governed by desires, to the will of God. Therefore, right prayer, when it is persistent, is will. That's Man's Eternal Quest, page 74.
Very nice.
Yeah, and it's super interesting, because I often, like, I was like that myself often, that I felt there's that something, I would like to have it, but isn't it up to God to give it to me? Like, if I pray for it, wouldn't I just then go and alter a plan? Maybe he has a much better plan for me than this one. And I guess this is a valid thought that a lot of people have, and you always have to weigh it. But there's definitely a right time to pray for something that you feel like you should be doing, you should be having. And that's what Guruji describes here. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah. I think I've said before, one of my favorite sayings for fun is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And this kind of comes into that, because I believe in making plans for life. Meditate. When am I going to meditate? Okay, I'm going to plan to meditate, this time and this. So that's a form of plan, and you're using a will. But essentially, the attunement is where I fall back to. Okay, well, if I'm praying for guidance, if I'm feeling like this is the right thing that I should do, it's part of God's will as well. And when I'm going against God's will, you generally feel that. Well, I feel the friction in life, the combativeness, the general unease about it. I suppose that's maybe when I sense myself that, okay, maybe this isn't with the will of God. Like that's kind of how I break it down. I don't know about you guys, if you try to like keep a tune with that or sense it, but it's an art form and a skill.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance you need to strike to know when to do the right thing. And I guess it also has to do with intuition. Like he says, we have to bend our will so that it doesn't follow our desires, but instead it becomes the will of God, which is, I guess, the other side of the coin, right? So you shouldn't just go out and pray for everything you see all the time and wish all the time, but see if that's really a thing for you to have that is actually gonna help you on your way to God. I think we can move along to a very interesting story that Priyanka read in Majda about Guruji meeting a necromancer, or Guruji going to I think it's at the burning gods, right? And he meets a, not a necromancer, he meets an ascetic, a tantric ascetic, and he meditates with him, and it's very interesting. Lauren, do you want to go first?
No, I was just going to go back, but it's fine if you want to move on.
No, say it.
Go.
Well, I was just going to say, I find it very important that at the end of that tale about the boil, he says, gravely, Mother instructed me never to use the power of words for doing harm. I have always remembered her counsel and followed it. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like it's stressed how we should be receptive to the teachings, right? And there, even as a small, maybe like 5-year-old, there he was being receptive to his mother's teachings. I think if she had never said that, he may have taken longer to learn that lesson and created more karma. So yeah, just wanted to throw that one in there before we move on. But
I think it's
carry
quite
on,
beautiful. I think it's quite beautiful that part of it as well, is
Yeah.
because they say your parents are your first guru in India,
Mm,
and he's certainly treating his mother as a guru there in terms of his loyalty to some truth that he remembers from his very earliest memories, and sticking to it as if it was gospel, and it is gospel for him. So yeah, very, very good point. But necromancer, Mike,
yes,
should I go on?
Yes. Do you want to tell us about the story?
Yes. So this is in the Mejda book, and it's pretty scary. So if you're a bit afraid of ghosts and goblins and dead people, then skip forward 5 minutes, unless we go on for half an hour, in which case, God help you. But because you could skip 5 minutes and I'll say the word skull or something, and then anyway, Mejda is so Mukunda was a very he doesn't actually talk about this much in his autobiography, but he experimented a lot with tantra, and you'll recall tantra is a word which is about manifesting certain things. It's about the power of manifesting certain things. So the great tantric Milarepa was a great tantric, and we discussed him in the preface. So mantra is the word, and yantra with a Y is the form or the act or the transpiring, and tantra is the way to convert that word into the outcome or the form that you desire. So so this book, this section is, so he was basically practicing occult, and Mike said that he met a necromancer, and that is true, because the two definitions of necromancer is one where you're basically toying with the departed, and second where you're just generally carrying out sorcery, black magic type things. So Lauren, do you want to start? This is when he was young.
We'll start our spooky tale. Okay. Mejda left no stone unturned in his spiritual investigations. He went often to Mintala cremation grounds. It was there that our mother's body had been cremated. In the stark atmosphere of death, he contemplated the uselessness of attachment to the impermanent body and its ceaseless demands. At first, I accompanied him. Mejda easily became absorbed in his meditations there, but the surroundings only frightened me. I stopped going with him. A short time later, I noticed that a matted-haired ascetic dressed in a dark red cloth often came home with Mejda. They would go directly to his attic room. I was scared of the sadhu, for his eyes were always red. On his forehead was a long mark of deep vermilion.
One day, when the two of them had left the house, I secretly stole up to the meditation room. I gasped when I saw a human skull and 2 human bones placed crosswise, resting on a wooden stand. The skull had a vermilion mark like the sadhu's. As fast as my legs could carry me, I ran back downstairs. My father returned from the office that night, and I told him about Mejda's visit to Nimtala, and also about the sadhu and the human bones. Father spoke quietly to Mejda. He explained the harm that could come from tantric practices. Mejda took father's words to heart, and soon thereafter the sadhu came back to take away the human skull and bones. Mejda never again performed the rites prescribed in tantras, and he also counseled others to stay away from them. So this probably would have been the culmination of his aversion to tantra, because we're going to talk in a short, in the episodes to come, we're going to talk about his other tantric experiments, which this is just the opening of the can of worms. Mike?
The two things that are interesting here. One is that his father, in the end, scolded him, told him never to do it again. And it's like Lauren mentioned earlier, like you have this interaction between his parents and, like you said, Priyank, they're like his first gurus, and they tell him, stay away from this. The other thing I want to say is just, so I don't really understand what was going on. I mean, it looks super scary, right? Like I don't want to meditate with a skull and bones. And this sounds like if my friends would see me like that, they were like, oh, what's happened to Mike? I think he went a bit crazy. And but it's something, is that maybe a way that he was trying to communicate with his departed mother?
That's right, yeah. That was one of the things that he was trying to do. And he actually succeeds, but we'll talk about that on another episode. Chris?
There's something about this subject that I think kids, teenagers, maybe more specifically, some of them get allured to. The Ouija board. I'm thinking of the Ouija board. There's something about this mysterious occult nature that is curious to people. Thankfully, I never went near that. I do know some people, younger, that when I was younger did have a go on Ouija board. I just wonder, with these kind of subjects as a child, it's not very often talked about, isn't it? It's kind of taboo, you don't really do that. But then maybe in a more mature society, do you think maybe we would educate and talk about, the consequences essentially of doing these things, and have a bit more of a conversation around it, and that would stop kind of any kind of tragedy or any kind of incident unfolding where somebody might get led into something unawares to them. I'm curious. Just I see nodding heads. I suppose maybe that might be.
But no one knows though. Who knows what the impact is of doing Ouija boards and all those other things, necromantic things.
I don't know. You're looking at me as if you know, Frank.
Spill
the beans.
I do. Maybe not on this podcast. We'll do a parallel podcast, perhaps. The other side. Mike?
We can talk more about aliens as well, and all the subjects. I do think that some of the lessons that Guruji put in the Autobiography of a Yogi and his writing, some of them are for us right now. And I feel like some of them might become more important in maybe 100 years, or in a time when maybe people will be more spiritually advanced, and those kind of questions will come up more. And then people will look at this and say, okay, I know what the right direction is. I think for us, this is like, it doesn't really seem a problem in our society these days that people are becoming necromancers or trying to, but imagine it would be common knowledge that we are souls, that we are reincarnating, that there is the whole astral plane out there, and that there is ways to interact with them. Wouldn't then people just go out there and say, okay, yes, let's go for it? I feel like the lure would be much stronger. Lauren?
I don't know about anyone else, but I feel quite comforted by this story, purely because it's that first line where it says, Mejda left no stone unturned in his spiritual investigations. So even though he's done this, which, you know, which to me feels very on the opposite of what one should be doing, but he actually investigated that. He didn't believe something and just leave it. He actually went in and looked at it himself and tried to find the truth on our behalf as well. So now we don't have to do that, which is great. But yeah, it's, for me, it's comforting because now it's like, well, he's actually been on that search, and he can bring us his findings, and now we know, you know. So yeah.
Oh man, Lawrence, are you not up for doing some necromancing?
I'm good actually.
Oh, you have to
I
find a
know.
new necromant buddy.
I know, such a shame.
But I guess what we learn from here is that none of us should be doing it. It's probably not it's definitely not going to help us on our way to God. And that's what we're looking for, right? So I guess that's what Guruji is the role model for. That's why he lived a life the way he did. And I guess he also shows that there's like, every now and then there's like a junction and you can turn left or right, and he often tries to tell us which is the right one. I think this subject is also talked about a little bit in God Talks to Arjuna. And in that book, Guruji has a tendency to be a lot more straightforward and goes more into depth about this subject.
I had some distant family, and the young daughter passed away in her sleep, and it was obviously very traumatic for the family. But the mother went into this kind of mode where she started exploring, you know, communicating with the other side and trying to communicate with her departed daughter, and she says she succeeded, and she says all sorts of stories about how they communicate and all that kind of stuff. And then when my mum passed away last year, and she got in touch with my sisters and myself and said, oh, you know, I need to speak to you, you know, I've got a message for you. And I knew exactly where I was going. And obviously being on this path, we have a lot of faith, and with Guru's role in, you know, our family and taking care of things. So that's not something that I knew I didn't need to explore that, so I pretty much ignored it. And I told my sisters to ignore it as well, because spiritually I obviously practice much more than them. So I told them to just ignore it. But they were both really inquisitive, and they both went to her and got loads of things, and it wasn't very good, basically, in terms of what she was saying. But I thought it was interesting that my sisters, like, usually they take my advice in matters like of spirituality, like without even questioning it. But this, because there was such a strong affinity for my mum who's just passed away, then perhaps that's why they just, you know, any hope they cling on to, and when logic and experience goes out the window.
Yeah.
That's, I'm not sure what exactly the role of this will be in the future, and maybe in a higher age people will depart and we will still be able to communicate with them in a different way. I do feel like it is a bit of a distraction. I mean, the time we're using to try to communicate with departed loved ones, we could actually spend it on talking to God, right? And people keep complaining they don't have enough time to meditate. So I feel like it's also about priorities.
Time and also energy. I think it probably is very draining energy-wise, because if you're spending your energy in this direction, then you only have for mere mortals, we only have a limited cup, and then you don't have, even though you may have the time, you don't have the desire or the inclination or the perseverance, because you've got your mind distracted in another direction.
Very true.
there's another guru out there that actually does talk on the subject of death quite a bit, and all I'll say is that he simply says, leave the dead to the dead, leave the living to the living. That's it, plain and simple. And it's probably pretty wise advice. I think so. I'll take that advice. Guruji gave his, in other words, I suppose, doesn't he?
I think this is a good cue to wrap up the necromancer story and move on to the next thing, which is Guruji. So they moved to Lahore, which is in the Punjab. Lahore today is in Pakistan, but back then it was part of India. And so they moved there, and they're quite excited. They have a really big house, and they have a lot of kids, right? So they, like, I think when you move as a kid, it's different than when you move as an adult. But they're just exploring everything. And then the first thing that Guruji is doing is, okay, there's a new house, new place. Where is my prayer room? Where can I put my picture of the goddess Kali? And then he finds a place that he likes, and then he puts some curtain around it and makes it his sacred prayer spot. And he feels very confident that things will happen when he prays for something, especially in this spot. And we talked already a bit about the power of prayer, and we can talk about it a bit more. And we have a section here that we can read out, which is about how to pray in a successful way. And then also we have a story which is very interesting about Guruji in Dakshineswar. But let's start out reading about prayer a little bit. Priyank, would you be happy to read out that first section?
Prayer is a demand of the soul. God did not make us beggars. He created us in his image. The Bible and the Hindu scriptures declare it. A beggar who goes to a rich home and asks for alms receives a beggar's share, but the son can have anything he asks from his wealthy father. Therefore, we should not behave like beggars.
Divine ones, such as Christ, Krishna, and Buddha, did not lie when they said, "We are made in the image of God." Yet we see that some people have everything, seemingly born with a silver spoon in their mouth, whereas others seem to attract failure and troubles. Where is the image of God in them? The power of spirit lies within each one of us. The question is how to develop it.
If you will follow the lesson in my experiences with God, you are bound to find the result you are seeking. In the past, you may have been disappointed that your prayers were not answered, but do not lose faith. In order to find out if your prayers work or not, you must have in your mind an initial belief in the power of prayer.
Nice. So it's so we learned earlier that it is important sometimes to actually use our willpower, bend our will to the will of God, but then use that will to form a prayer and then actually pray it with conviction. And the other thing is that we should not pray as a beggar, but we should pray as a son of God. And as Guruji describes here so nicely, that if you pray as a beggar, you get a beggar's share. But if you pray as a son, your father will give you anything you want. And that is the attitude that Guruji has when he prays for something. And he is a little kid. And so he goes to Divine Mother, and he doesn't pray as a beggar. He prays as someone who is her son, who is and he expects the things to actually happen, even though they might not always be like things that are very spiritual, as we will see in the kite story.
What do you guys think is the likelihood that God would give people who are praying erroneously for material wealth or other things that they might want, and he might actually give it to them just to test them? Do you think that's actually likely? Because in this sense, what I'm kind of getting from this is like, well, you know, you can pray, but you might not get it. But actually, could there be another aspect to it where, you know, God does answer your prayers and gives you what you want just to test you as well? Be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, he does. Like, for example, we choose our own fate, don't we? If we want to be reborn, we'll continue enjoying these pleasures of this plane. And in a way, then we're praying for them to in our next incarnation. And so, knowingly or unknowingly, that is our prayer. And our prayer is granted, isn't it? We're reborn here.
Yeah, and doesn't Guruji say that it's easier to become self-realized than to become a millionaire? Because in this world there aren't many millionaires, and a lot of people, they keep praying for this, and it doesn't happen. And if they would have spent that same amount of time into finding God, then they might have succeeded.
But how much easier is it to become a smile millionaire, do you think?
Is it a fake smile millionaire or a true smile?
Guruji doesn't specify if it's a fake or true. It says, be a smile millionaire. It's a quote, Lauren, I don't know if you heard it.
I actually haven't heard of that one before. But doesn't he say somewhere something like, never show sweetness that is not inwardly felt? So, something along those lines. Can't remember where, but yes. And I feel like that is true, isn't it? It's the sincerity behind that smile.
That would make you, Lauren, a trillionaire. The first trillionaire is on this podcast, my friends.
Indeed. Signatures available upon request.
You've heard it here first. Yes. I remember Brother Bhaktananda said, he said that a few times, that he says it's a pretty incredible, the things that people don't get because they don't pray for them. And the way it sounded to me was like, there's like, if you imagine this in like an astral picture, you have like those beings, and there's like all those dreams, and they are floating around them, and they're so close, but then it doesn't happen. And I feel like this happens often in our lives, and with prayer we could make this a more successful endeavor. Let's go into this Dakshineswar Kali story. Do you want to set it up a bit, Priyank?
Yeah, so Goddess Kali, this is the first mention that Guruji does of Goddess Kali. Kala means many things. It means dark, the dark one, or time, beyond time. So it means many things, but essentially, like if you Google it, it's this feminine divine deity of dancing goddess, and she's got her tongue out in like a fierce kind of rage looking. So it's quite a fierce form of divine mother that is worshipped. And in the most notable or most famous temple is in Dakshineshwar, which is where Guruji spent some time, and he loved that. He loved that form there, that temple there, and he also, his mum used to make little clay divine mother forms and like dress it up in like jute hair, which is like this it's like a very fibrous substance, organic substance. So you dress it up and like you put eyes on it, and so you make this clay like idol and a deity. And Guruji apparently was very good at making these as well, because he must have seen his mum making it, and he used to make it. So the point is, he used to be very, very, very devotional towards Divine Mother.
I just wanted to add something about this Dakshineswar temple, because I think it's pretty known among devotees, because YSS has their ashram pretty much 1 block down the street from it. And it's also the same temple, I think, that we'll talk about way later in the autobiography, about when his sister Roma and her husband will go there.
Yes. So there's this lovely story about another mysticism story in Mejda about Guruji's experiences in this temple, which again, a little bit scary. So if you may want to skip ahead 5 minutes. Chris, you want to start us off? And Lauren,
Sure.
you can continue.
Whenever we went to Dakshineswar, we first received darshan of the beautiful statue of Mother Kali. When we meditated in the portico in front of the temple. Next, we would meditate in the room of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. And then Mejda would spend several hours meditating outside under the sheltering branches of the large banyan tree in the Panchavati, where Sri Ramakrishna received illumination. Sometimes Mejda would also sit under the bell tree to the east of the temple, another of Ramakrishna's favorite meditation spots. Immersed in the thought of God, sitting beside a silently flowing Ganges on these sanctified grounds, it is difficult to describe the peace and joy of our pilgrimages. At sunset, Arati was performed in the temple before the image of Kali. After joining in the ceremony, we would take prasad and return home.
One evening, we went to call Mejda from his meditation under the Panchavati tree, as it was time for Arati. The quiet eventide had wrapped Mejda's meditation nook in deep shadows. As we approached, we saw a halo of soft light encircling Mejda's body. A snake had coiled itself around his neck. Another lay in his lap. The scene immobilized us for a moment. Then I called out, "Mejda, Mejda," when at first he didn't respond. Manomohan and Jitendra also called him. In a few moments, Mejda stirred slightly. Then he gently clapped his hands, and the snakes slipped away quietly into the dense underbrush surrounding the tree. When we mentioned the incident to Mejda later, he spoke lightly about it, saying it was nothing.
Very, very mystical.
Imagine you just clap some snakes away and say, nothing.
So that reminds me of another story of, where Sri Yukteswar was playing with snakes, and I think snakes have a special kind of receptivity towards, like, I don't know how to call that, but there's a lot of yogis that interact with snakes because they seem to be a very receptive creature, and you can tell the snake what to do and it does it. And yeah, that's the end of it, what I have to say, but I have to research that more.
Yeah, the energy or the astral body of a snake is like apparently quite similar or advanced, similar to humans or advanced. So you can use snakes to further, if you're that way inclined, or if you know what you're doing, you can use snakes for your own spiritual sadhana. It's a bit of a mystical process, but yeah, not one for the average Joe, shall we say. Shiva, for example, is known to have have a snake coiled around his neck, and Krishna was also very adept with snakes, cobras, and there's some beautiful stories about how he was quite quite capable of manipulating a snake in his youth.
And cows as well, right? I think they're the only two animals that are meant to have more of a developed astral body, snakes and cows. Really interesting, yes. Questions. I don't know what and Arati is. Correct. Do you know?
Yes, art is actually arti, but I don't know why they've spelled it like arati. It's arti, which is like a plate of ghee lamps that you'd offer as a devotional practice in front of a deity or an altar. So it's like you do circular motions around the your offering, the altar or the god that you're offering to.
And how old was Mechta? How old was young Paramahansa Yogananda, young Mukunda here?
Yeah, it doesn't say, but I imagine probably like 11, 12.
It's immense, isn't it? Because here's a story. It blows me away hearing this. It's the first time I've heard it. It's such a great story that's being told in the book Mechta. And you've got a young developing yogi just meditating for hours, not bothered by the slightest, as most people would be if snakes were, coming up their body, amazingly advanced and in tune. And how great would it be to be in these places where you're going, the anchored spiritual wealth in this area must be amazing. It's on my bucket list of places to go see and try to find these areas and try to meditate there and piggyback off some of the progress made there.
I went to the Kali temple a few times, and it is, as you can imagine, it's India, so every place in India is crowded. So this place is extra crowded. So you have to go there super early in the morning and then try to get a good spot to actually, because you're supposed to take off your shoes when you go to any of the shrines, and then it has everything has 1,000,000 degrees, and the sun heats up, like everything is like marble or stone or something, and it is just in a place where the sun hits, you just can't sit. It's too hot. I mean, I'm guessing there's ways to mitigate all of this, and maybe I wasn't as prepared as I could have been, but that's what I remember. And then once I found a place there to meditate, I was so happy. And so my point was, I guess, just to feel this amazing kind of vibration that is definitely there, and I felt it, but it first took me a while to get all through the bodily discomforts that I had before I went there.
Is this part of the sadhana? Like,
yes,
to go through the pain,
yes.
distractions.
Yes, like some extra steps. When you grow up in the West, you have to go through some extra steps to get there.
Yeah. Or is it that in the West we've got such soft, protected little feet, with our expensive, comfy padded shoes, that maybe it's a little bit more sensitive to the heat and the extremes of the floors. I don't know, but my wife and I we live in Brazil here, and she can happily walk around barefoot on the ground. And when I do it, I'm jumping from place to place trying to find the softest spot. It's practice and training, right? Frank's shaking his head in disgust.
Your feet are weak.
Exactly. Yeah. Got slippers on at the moment. That's probably.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what Mike's talking about. It gets very, very hot, and I actually find it really good practice to, like, because there's that practice of walking on coal that you can actually do, but you think you can't do it. So I've practiced it a few times, just try and walk, not put any thought on the near soaring temperature of the stone in the India sun.
How'd it go?
Yeah, it went pretty well, pretty cool.
Okay.
And then, but you're obviously very, very glad that it's over when you get to the shady spot.
That's good. We're happy. No third-degree burns or anything like that. Yeah, I find this story, it's what Chris said earlier, that you have like a 12-year-old, you go with him to this place, and the thing that Priyank also just said, that he said Shiva had like a snake coil around his neck. So if you are Hindu, maybe you look at this and you go like, wow, this is I've seen that before.
Certainly, that's why it's very significant for Indian. And also Shiva, there's another story where like his throat is like a different, it's like an ashed color. It's like a different color to his head. It's because he drank, there was some insanity that happened during creation, and you can look up this story, and the universe was churned, and he had to drink the poison, and because he was a master, he was able to keep the poison here and not let it go down and enter his blood. So because he's a master yogi, so there's a lot of symbology with snakes and venom and things like that.
The thing with snakes that I've heard is this ability to be sensitive to vibration, so they can even sense an earthquake on the opposite end of the planet because their bellies are on the ground really, and they're super sensitive to any movement, in the Earth's core and everything like that. So that may have then extrapolate that out to the deep stillness, in yogis, that they maybe can feel that as well, or maybe the absence of that, and maybe they're drawn to that for some reason as well. It is extremely curious, isn't it? But really has some foundation in what science today can prove as well, which is quite fun.
Also, animals, not just snakes, animals in general are very sensitive, especially to like climate and environment, because during like the tsunami, they didn't find that any animals that died in certain parts of the coast and stuff, because they'd moved before it came, they'd moved inland. How they knew to do that, heaven only knows, because obviously lots of humans unfortunately perished and their homes were destroyed. But animals, somehow, lots of them just moved to higher ground.
Yeah, somehow this reminds me of the Avatar movie that's in the movie theaters right now. There's like, they always emphasize there that like Mother Nature talks to you, and there's like this kind of way of life where everything is natural and everything is working, and then technology is being seen as the evil, the unnatural thing. And I guess Dwapara Yuga though is that age where we use technology, and so we just have to go with the flow, I guess, make the best of it. So the next section, because I'm moving on now, we're moving to just two little paragraphs. It's still part of the story where you have it's summarized a little bit the story with Uma and the boil. And what Guruji says is that he noticed that he says the words and they carry such vibration. If you say them with conviction, he says they explode like bombs and they produce definite effects. And that is something that he then, of course, says later in his life, he wouldn't use it to create boils. He would use it to create good things in his life or to remove obstacles from his life. And also he writes it here for us to use, right? So we can also use, if we pray with conviction, we can also remove obstacles from our lives. And this way to say it, words like bombs, this sounded familiar because this is also being used in the little booklet, Scientific Healing Affirmations. And the first section there is called Why Affirmations Work. And I think we should start out by reading this. Lauren, would you be?
Man's word is spirit in man. Spoken words are sounds occasioned by the vibrations of thoughts. Thoughts are vibrations sent forth by the ego or by the soul. Every word you utter should be potent with soul vibration. A man's words are lifeless if he fails to impregnate them with spiritual force. Talkativeness, exaggeration, or falsehood makes your words as ineffective as paper bullets shot from a toy gun. Speech and prayers of garrulous or inaccurate persons are unlikely to produce beneficial changes in the order of things. Man's words should represent not only truth, but also his definite understanding and realization. Speech without soul force is like husks without corn.
Words saturated with sincerity, conviction, faith, and intuition are like highly explosive vibration bombs, which, when set off, shatter the rocks of difficulties and create the change desired. Avoid speaking unpleasant words, even if true. Sincere words or affirmations repeated understandingly, feelingly, and willingly are sure to move the omnipresent cosmic vibratory force to render aid in your difficulty. Appeal to that power with infinite confidence, casting out all doubt. Otherwise, the arrow of your attention will be deflected from its mark. After you have sown in the soil of cosmic consciousness your vibratory prayer seed, do not pluck it out frequently to see whether or not it has germinated. Give the divine forces a chance to work uninterruptedly. And this is from Scientific Healing Affirmations.
Yeah, and this is kind of the summary of the way we talked about prayer so far, I would say. So that there's basically like a recipe for a good prayer. And a lot has to do with what we pray for. And Guruji here very elegantly, he doesn't say it in a way that you need to use your intellect to find out what you need to pray for, but it should be something that the soul is longing for. It should be a sincere prayer. This is a word that he used a few times. And then if it's sincere, then it resonates with you. And then you can put more vibratory force behind it.
One of my favorite quotes, I think I probably said it a few times on the last season, is from the Bible, is John 1:1, and it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And it's such a powerful statement, isn't it? Like when we think about words, the vibrationary tones that we're using has real significance. I mean, that's one of the first lines in the Bible. It's such a strong bit of information in there. Everything's just hidden, waiting for us to be unpacked. And there's Guruji talking about it at length, actually. Gives us the actual mechanism behind how to use our words. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and he also gives, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and the word has the other significance, isn't it? The word is not just the physical vibration. It's the word of, it's like, I've forgotten. But yeah, there's some other significance about the word.
In the footnote, Guruji writes about, it's similar to what Chris just said, that the creative word Om is the cosmic vibratory force that is behind all atomic energies, as he says it. And that if it's spoken with a realization and with deep concentration. So when he says spoken with clear realization, I'm not exactly sure what that means. Does that mean you have to be self-realized? Or does that mean you just, the thing you're praying for needs to kind of have reached some kind of realization in your thoughts?
Suppose this is maybe what sort of magic lies behind great speakers. Think of Martin Luther King, or whoever you want to think of. Whenever they speak, you pay attention. They actually reach you more than just a logical, rational level of the words that they're saying. They're reaching you in many different depths. So it is really beautiful if you can't get it right. I don't know what the answer to your question is, though, Mike. I can't.
Did not expect an answer.
No.
But with a really harmless story, Guruji gives us a cue how to solve problems in our lives just by praying. If we continue reading that footnote, he says something very interesting that I found I had to jump on, which is that if you use repetition of words, either silently or out loud, it has an effect. And then he mentioned a word that I find difficult to pronounce. It's Couéism, and it's a type of psychotherapy, and it's by a French psychotherapist from the 1800s. His name is Émile Coué de la Châtaignerie. Priyank would know better how to say that.
Yeah.
And he was a psychologist, as we said, and he had a very popular method. In French, it's called la méthode Coué, or the Coué method. And it basically teaches self-improvement based on optimistic autosuggestion. So basically, it means you are sick, you go like, I'm healed, I'm healed. So that's how I understand it. And we looked him up in Wikipedia, and they explain the Coué method a little bit. Chris, would you be so kind to read the first part? Then Priyank.
Sure. The application of his mantra-like conscious autosuggestion, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. This is something in French that I think tous les jours, j'y vais, j'y mieux en mieux. That's butchered it.
Bravo,
Sorry, French.
bravo.
It's called Coué or the Coué method. Some American newspapers quoted it differently. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. The Coué method centered on a routine repetition of this particular expression according to a specified ritual, preferably as many as 20 times a day, and especially at the beginning and at the end of each day.
When asked whether or not he thought of himself as a healer, Coué often stated that, I've never cured anyone in my life. All I do is show people how they can cure themselves. Unlike a commonly held belief that a strong conscience will constitute the best path to success, Coué mentioned that curing some of our troubles requires a change in our unconscious thought, which can be achieved only by using our imagination. Although stressing that he was not primarily a healer, but one who taught others to heal themselves, Coué claimed to have effected organic changes through autosuggestion. Sounds very Guruji-esque, doesn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
And I think the most beautiful part for me there is the end of what you just read there, Priyank, although stressing that he was not primarily a healer, but one who taught others how to heal themselves. I think often we kind of want to go and buy the recent, gadget to heal ourselves, the pill in the pharmacy off the shelf, and just heal ourselves immediately, but or get somebody else to heal us. Whereas maybe we have this strength and power latent within ourselves. So it's a really beautiful, humble sort of comment that he makes there. Very Guruji-esque. Yeah.
And it was around that similar time to Guruji, so his philosophies would have fruitioned at the time where Guruji was around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you got points of light everywhere in the world, even where you don't expect it. You have like a psychotherapist who uses mantras to heal people. This is very, very higher ages. And I'm guessing that's how we will be cured in the future. Probably most of our diseases will probably be healed by right diet and by mantras, as yeah, because it's more efficient. There is a supermarket here in Los Angeles, or actually all over the United States. It's called Erewhon, and it's often made fun of on social media because it's so expensive. It's like you pay you get a sandwich there and the juice, and you pay $40. And it's the thing why I mention it is because they chose that name because there was a book named Erewhon. And that is actually a book where the author talks about a future where people heal themselves by right diet. And this is kind of what they used as a theme for their supermarket.
There's
Very
one
new.
similar, I think Planet Organic, favorite place, but sore in the wallet. Beautiful ingredients.
Yeah, Planet Organic is a discount store compared to Erewhon.
Yeah.
Mike's become a new age snob now. We've moved to.
I try not to
Holy
go there.
shit.
I
There's
try
one very
not to
close
go
to
there.
there's one very close to Lake Shrine, so that's why it's often
So that's why.
we end up there. I never suggest it.
I bet you have shares in the place, Mike.
I wish. I mean, come on. Yeah, because it's not like the place is empty. The place charges $40 for a sandwich and a juice, and it's full. So that's
How was
you
the? I know you've had that sandwich and juice, Mike. How was it? See, look, I knew it. How was the sandwich and juice? Was it uplifting energy wise?
So like every bite that I took, I compared it to the value that it's cost me, and it was good, yeah. But yeah, I don't want to talk badly about things. So I do think this store has its place, definitely in a place like LA,
Especially when you're a principal shareholder, I suppose.
For sure. And we're coming to the last story of the chapter now, which I initially described as the story of the two balloons, but it wasn't. There was two kites, of course.
What does that mean, Mike? What does it mean that in your mind, this famous story was one of balloons? Like there was auto-suggestion in your mind where replace kites with balloons.
Yeah, I will journal on balloons now.
Please report back with your findings next week.
I will. I might do. Journaling is something very personal, as you know, Priyan. So. I might come back. I might not. With my findings. Anyways, so the story is actually pretty simple because it's again Uma, and as we know, as we also saw in the Metta book, it's like, so Uma and Guruji, they have a lot of affection for each other. They love each other dearly and hug each other a lot, but also they love to challenge each other. And Uma, I guess, sees Guruji a bit as the crazy spiritual brother that she has, and so she likes to tease him. And so now it's time for Guruji to strike back, I guess, in that story. And so he, as we talked earlier, he's very confident that any prayer he speaks at his sacred spot that he found in the house will be fulfilled by a Divine Mother. And then Uma puts it to a test, and this story is also in the Metta book and in the Autobiography. And so Guruji asks Uma what he should do, and she sees two boys playing with kites at the house across the street, and she says, I want the first kite. And then in the Metta book, Guruji goes like, you could ask me for anything, and you asked me for those kites. Are you sure? And I guess what he meant is you could ask for a lot more profound things from me than those kites. And she goes like, no, don't talk so much, Mukunda, just give me that kite, just bring it to me. And of course he prays for it, and then somehow the one boy loses one of the kites. I think the two strings rub against each other, the kite flies over and gets stuck in a cactus plant that stands basically next to Guruji's window, and he can just grab it and he's got it. And then she goes like, okay, that was a coincidence, but I don't believe that this was Divine Mother. That just happened randomly. Make the second kite come over here as well. And then, of course, the same way the first kite came, the boys lost the other kite as well, and also got stuck in the cactus plant. And that impressed Uma. Uma then thought, wow, this is actually, there is something there. There is a strong connection with Divine Mother, and she does help him. But her reaction is one of, I'm scared. I'm gonna walk away now. This is the way she worded it, like, this is all too uncanny for me. So she's like, I don't know. She did not expect that result at all. She kind of started teasing him because she thought she could actually make fun of him, but it basically taught her a lesson.
This story reminds me of one that maybe we'd all be familiar with in our own personal experiences, which is, how do you differentiate between coincidence and something not of a miracle, but something of a of a more firm and concrete kind of reality whereby you should pay attention to it. Do you look for patterns in life, or do you take everything as a message? And it's a fine line, but certainly if somebody was to manifest something like this in front of me, I think the vast majority of people, even the hardened cynics out there, would be a little bit shaken by this experience.
I really love seeming coincidences, and then to the point where I've challenged whether or not coincidences actually exist. It's just all the play, and then sometimes you see things which are seemingly too uncanny, and you call it a coincidence. But life is just a series of coincidences, and it's just one after the other. I remember when I was a youth, 19 or something, I went to India, and I journaled. The whole book was coincidences. Every day I wrote about various things that I considered coincidences. And as I went through it, I realized they weren't just coincidences. It was virtually every day. So I was really looking for things that were just falling into place. And there were so many things. And I've still got this journal. It's one of my favorite journals this 3-month period. And it's just full of inspiration in terms of how God, works with a devotee who's sincere.
And with Guruji as well, right? If anybody's on the path, I can say so many times I've been thinking something, praying something. You open up the lesson and bang, there's your answer. Or the topic, you go into the center. When I was going into the London Center, and the talk that day, with the service would be the exact thing that I was thinking about just the day before. And eventually, you kind of have to, humble yourself to say, okay, well, they're not coincidences. It's actually a little story, and you've got part in it, and that's it, right? But it's the Truman Show, no, Priyank? If everything's designated in some way towards yourself, and we're all at the center of our own stories. It's the Priyank Show, the version of that Priyank Show.
Lord Show.
Yeah.
The one thing which is pretty cool about this is that it's the 2 boys flying kites over roofs. So many people I imagine on this scene, many people were playing with kites in this busy rooftop Lahore setting. And this kind of suggests actual date that it could have been for me, because there's a festival in India called Uttarayan. In Gujarat, that's what we call it, and Rajasthan, and in other parts of India they call it Makar Sankranti and Pongal and other things, and Lori in Punjab. So it's basically the passing of winter and the entrance of summer, and all over India they celebrate it. And because summer has come, it's like they devote their prayers to Surya Bhagwan, which is the deity responsible for the sun. all that sun heat energy. And so then there's this great festival. And in India, I remember this was my favorite festival in India when I used to live there and go back there. They used to, so my wife's there right now. We're recording in January, and she just took part in this festival. And so what it is it's basically one massive party celebration, but not party in the Western sense. There's everyone's on their roofs in the late afternoon when the sun's not so fierce, or early in the morning. So everyone's on their roofs, and in India, in the villages especially, they're flat roofs. So you can go, and it's like one big open balcony. So you go on the roof, and there'll be 5 or 6 houses around. You'll be speaking to the neighbors, and everyone will be playing with kites. And there's this lovely game where you try and destroy try and like steal someone else's kite by cutting their string, fiberglass string. So it's a really, really fun game, and I thought I'd be really good at it. I considered myself as really good at it, but I used to really enjoy it. So yeah, it's a really good, fun festival in India. So January is the time to go to India. Best climate and really very cool festivals. In Punjab, there's this like special like dance and festival songs and things like that. So it's different in different parts of India, but highly recommend going in January to India.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Father-in-law is out there at the moment traveling around. He just set a picture of himself in the Ganges this morning, I think it was. So yeah, he's timed it right.
Very nice.
To your advice.
Yeah, don't go in April like I did. It was very warm. It was basically very nice in the mountains. So that's why April is good. But don't go to the big cities in April. You will, especially if you're not. I mean, I like heat, but there's too much of everything. So January sounds good. I think January is probably when the big when the monsoon season has ended, right? And everything is clean and green, right? And everything is blooming, I'm guessing. That's very nice. Yeah, here in LA, we had a lot of rain the last few weeks, and now this place looks so different. Like you look at those hills, and usually they're all brown, and now everything is so green. Almost looks like you're in Europe now. I love it. Yeah. So Guruji is like this the story of this emissary, right? Of this avatar. And when we had other stories like that, like I compare it now to the childhood of Krishna and Christ, you had childhoods that were basically, they had little miracles everywhere, and everyone who was present had like at least one miracle to talk about. And that's what I want to get at. Like there's a section in the Second Coming of Christ that we're gonna read out now. It's about the miracles that happened during Jesus' youth, and some people point out that the miracles that happened during the youth of Jesus and Krishna, they're sometimes similar. And so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that there's miracles happening all over the place with young Guruji. Chris, would you be okay to read the first part?
Sure. Miracles, according to the will of God, exude from his divine emissaries, whether consciously initiated or spontaneously expressed through the physical instrumentality from the superconscious motivation of the indwelling God-tuned soul. Thus, even in childhood, Jesus possessed great powers, akin to those he had manifested in his previous incarnation as Elisha, presaging the miracles of his adult ministry that showed command over life and death and over natural laws that do not yield their fixity except at a divine command.
In the infancy Gospels, Jesus is said to have spoken to his mother, even from the cradle, declaring his divine descent and world mission. When, as was the custom, the infant on the 40th day after birth was presented to God at the temple in Jerusalem, in quotes, angels stood around him, adoring him, as a king's guard stands around him, end quote. When honored by the wise men from the east, Mary gave to them one of the swaddling clothes in which Jesus was wrapped. At the same time, there appeared to them an angel in the form of that star, which had been their guide in their journey.
On their return to their own country, kings and princes came to them, inquiring what they had seen and done. They produced the swaddling cloth, and according to their custom, prepared a fire and worshipped the cloth and cast it into the sacred flame. And when the fire was put out, they took forth the swaddling cloth unhurt, as if the fire had not touched it.
And that section keeps going in the second coming with more miracles that happened. But I feel like, imagine you're like Jesus' mother Mary. I mean, I guess you already saw quite a few miracles. You had like angel Gabriel coming to you, telling you have a child, even though so it was conceived in a divine way, basically. And but imagine you have your kid lying in the cradle and it's an infant and it starts talking to you. I find that really funny. And also that scene with the angels suddenly appearing and then other people seeing them too. And so I think this is just a way to show people who are near that there is like something special, and if they are spiritually inclined, they would at this point then start becoming curious, right, and trying to follow this little kid. And I guess that's maybe how some of the disciples that Christ had found him, through those little miracles. So
What do you think this, on a more general note, this kite story is quite a strange one, isn't it? In the sense that obviously we discussed it to be too much of a coincidence, quote, to be a coincidence. It's more like a miracle, a very subtle miracle that he's kind of performing. But why is it here? A very subtle way of just saying, you know, divine mother and I are very in tune or connected, and you know, when challenged, mother will listen to what I'm saying. But I don't really understand. I'm not really getting the point.
I think Guruji just wants to show us the power of thought and prayer, that it's possible. I don't think he tells us those stories to make us worship him more. I think he tells us those stories because he kind of wants to show what is possible, and even as a little kid.
For me, the context of it is that he is a child. He was doing those things as a child, and essentially it was kind of like a bet to his sister. So it's quite childish kind of context, isn't it? The story. And then for me, what I take from it is like, you can get distracted by these things, but don't. It's childish. There's more, you know, more ways, better ways to spend your time. And he does actually give us the same sort of lesson, if you take that as the lesson throughout the autobiography of a yogi, with other gurus or other yogis, who are doing miraculous things. You know, he does talk about miracles in a sense, in other parts of the autobiography of a yogi. And then he kind of brings us back gently to the focus of what we should be doing, which is, of course, you know, what the SRF is about, with the lessons, the meditations, and things like this. So don't be childish, don't get distracted. Focus on what matters in this lifetime.
I love how each of us have like a different interpretation of the story, which is so lovely, because I feel like it gives you what you want or what you need to hear. Because for me, It's one of my favorite stories in the whole book. And it's the story that I really connected with from the beginning. It's the one that's always stood out. And to me, it's like divinity is in the little things in life, even if it's just pulling a kite from a boy's hands, and that we're always in tune with that divinity wherever we go. And for me, that's really special because it's like you can call upon, Divine Mother or whatever it is that you pray to at any moment, and the gift of their giving is always there. It's never gone. It's never out of your reach, physically and metaphysically. So yeah, I love the story. It's such a touching one. It's such a heartwarming one, and I love the childishness in it. For me, it's so sweet, and it's really uplifting, and it's very light-hearted. We've had quite a lot of very like poignant present miracles that are, very strong, but this is quite light, like a kite. Oh, that rhymed. But yeah, it's nice is what I'm trying to say.
I think you may have nailed it there, Lauren, because the previous few miracles are things like the divine healings, the manifestations of the Mahashai, and Himalayan yogis, and the very previous story to this was the moral of the story was where he, where he had the boil and he caused it to manifest and make it worse. So the moral of that story was, the power of man's word is very strong, and you should be careful with what you say. And here, it ends the chapter on a very light miracle, and it's fun, isn't it? It's a fun way to end the chapter, as opposed to if he ended it with, for example, his conversation with God, where God says, "I am Ishvara," then it ends it on a very meditative tone. Whereas here, like you can finish this chapter and get on with your life.
Yeah.
If you're commuting, you can finish this chapter and go to work without your eyes, in the back of your rolled up in the back of your head, where everyone would get very scared, and you couldn't perform in the first meeting of the day without feeling too etheric. But Lauren, for you, that'd be the first class of the day.
Yes.
Do you think for that similar sort of reason, do you think that's why I left out the story about the skull and bones and
many of those?
You're probably thinking, should I finish on that one or on the other one?
Of course, he knew. The hardcore amongst us will be reading Majda and, combining the autobiography and Majda together and reading them as a group, as what we're doing.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, so we covered chapter 1 of the Autobiography of a Yogi. Yes, we actually got there. 6 episodes, and I think we all have some feedback. So basically, the questions out there that we all asked ourselves was, what parts we liked? Did we discover something new in this section that we didn't know before? Because we all read the book before, but now it's more of a deep dive. Then a question maybe more for our audience would be like, what would you like to see different in the next chapter? And what are we looking forward to after this? Anyone who wants to go share their impressions first? Otherwise, I can go.
Yeah, you go first, Mike.
Because for me, I really liked the way Guruji talked about the marriage of his parents. I mean, unfortunately, he will stop talking about this in the next chapter already because his mom will pass away early. But I really liked how the two interacted with each other. And I feel like it's a bit of a role model for families out there who read this, the way they interact. I mean, times have changed, obviously, right? It's not going to be the same one-to-one, but I still think there's some good inspiration to be gotten from there. What I found surprising that Lahiri Mahashaya was actually very important in his birth and in his upbringing, because of course he was the guru of both of his parents, but also he presaged his birth, and he gave them instructions, and he told them, like we read earlier, Christ told Mary from the cradle what his mission is going to be, but Guruji didn't have to do that because Lahiri Mahashaya told his parents, which I found very interesting. My question to the listeners is, what do you think of the length of each episode that we're doing? I think all of our episodes, they were around 2 hours so far. And what is the general feeling? Is that too long, or is that okay? Or would you cut it into smaller chunks? And the thing that I look forward to is just to carry on with that story, because now we're in it, and now I can't wait for the next section. I mean, I think we all read the book and we all know kind of what's happening, but going deeply into it is very satisfying, and it's very nice. And I can't wait to see what new little nuggets will be revealed.
Indeed. Well, very, very well said, Mike, and summarized. Until now, I didn't realize how much of an emphasis this chapter was on Lahiri Mahashaya. Like when I've been picking like images and like words, etc., for the description and the thumbnails, so many have had to be Lahiri Mahashaya, because so much of the conversation was catered around him. In my mind, like Lahiri Mahashaya chapters were later on, you know, when he describes his life and etc. But it's here and now, and very, very sweetly interwoven with his early story. So I thought it was quite beautiful. I really enjoyed bolstering my knowledge and matching Guruji's narrative of the events of his early life with his brother's events of the version of the same events. So in Mejda, you know, we've shared stories that run parallel, and really actually, if we want to go deep, we have to kind of read them. We're privileged enough to be able to read them together. So it's good to be able to do that. Obviously, it makes it quite hard to just, you know, to have to pick up two books and see where this one ends and where this one begins and vice versa. But as I hope, as you've seen with our episodes, it kind of, the Mejda gives the background for various parts and narratives that Guruji either doesn't have time to explain or doesn't think it's appropriate, like with the two stories that we discussed today, doesn't think it's appropriate in that section of that chapter to go through them. So, but obviously for us hardcore devotees, it's very appropriate for us, and we're very blessed to be able to do that. So one question for the audience is, are we doing too many readings? Should we be talking more and reading less? That's one for you guys to come back to us. Or should we just do light readings as opposed to heavy Guruji's heavy words, which obviously have quite a lot of meaning and require more meditation and don't cater well to like a morning commute or a jog, or however you choose to listen to this, consume this podcast. So that's one I'd like to have some feedback on. Chris is laughing, so do you want to come back, Chris? Come on, why are you laughing?
You're at the gym and you're hit with this deep, meaningful, meditative statement, like you forget, you know, the dumbbells need to be held or something. You're in the middle of a bench press or something, distract. Don't lift heavy machine whilst listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to more of the same. I've really enjoyed it so far, and enjoyed it with you for 3 lovely people, 4 if you include Guruji. So thank you for joining, letting me join you, and you joining me.
I would say I can go, Lauren, but I'll offer you the privilege of going first if you like. Do you want? Shall I?
You go, Chris. Go.
So the guys have given some nice summaries there. I think what I liked.
Can I just interrupt? Chris didn't do his homework. Yeah, this is just off the cuff right now. This is his supernatural ability to not prepare and just talk like a true podcaster.
Well, no, he did actually add a comment on the card earlier, about an hour ago, with this. So it's been partly well thought out.
Cramming.
Off the cuff, an hour ago, yeah. I think what I like about it is that we're breaking down the stories, and there's so many little stories, aren't there, in every page. So it's action packed, and I knew it was action packed, but actually going back and consciously saying, okay, well, what stories are here? We can group these together. We can talk about these. It's great to be able to do that as an exercise. It brings out the lessons. We can then cross-reference everything. As Priyank said, there's so much material out there. It is a blessing to be able to do that, really. And what I love about my own kind of sadhana, in a sense, is taking some time and searching, and maybe going to the ebooks and looking up something there and pulling some lessons that Guruji has talked about. And in a sense, it kind of feels like that's almost the purpose. You know, when I look at this, maybe I'm applying purpose to it, but he says something so in a way, maybe nonchalantly. He drops some great truth in such a simplistic way that, you know, you can delve into it we can talk about it for an hour, and maybe we have to withhold ourselves from talking about it for, you know, an extra 30 minutes or 60 minutes easily. So it's a great practice really to do. And on the deep dive, what I discovered in this chapter, maybe as Priyank said, in terms of reflecting and how I put together the story of Autobiography in my mind, I wouldn't have said that he focused so much on essentially the dedications to the role models, his family, the Masha and others. He really dedicated that very, very strongly in this chapter. And it's very heartwarming and heartfelt to see just how much really detail he's given us to pick up from. And then a question for the audience is something close to my heart, is going off piste. You know, we have so many little tidbits, you know, whether it be, you know, rituals in India that I've never heard about that Priyank, you know, is kindly giving us information on today. Things like this when we're going off piste. Do we do it too often? Do you want to hear more of it? Do you enjoy it? Because it's something, maybe it might split some groups. Maybe some people would prefer to hear some more off-piste topic and conversations than others. And then, like the guys said, looking forward to the rest, doing the same thing over and over again. It's a blessing then to see what more we're going to learn throughout the next chapters of the Autobiography of Yogi.
I feel like we've had a lot of learning in this episode. Well, I certainly have. Oh, there's a plane going ahead. Don't know if you can hear that. But yeah, I really loved as well, similar to Chris, just how packed this chapter is. I feel like there's something in there for everyone. So if one story perhaps doesn't relate to you, there'll be something else that appeals to you. And I feel like that's been very purposefully done. So anyone from all walks of life can pick something from there that they love. Because I feel like there's been a lot of relatability, and also a lot of, you know, wonderment and otherworldliness, which can appeal to both sides to us. So I've loved that. And I've also really loved discovering how much more there is in the book than you first understand. You know, you read these words and they sink in and you know they're deep. But as we've discovered in our podcast, there's so many other topics that you can delve into. And, you know, we could talk for hours and hours and hours just on one, which it just shows how limitless this book is, which I love. So yeah, that's been really great for me. And yeah, I think for our listeners and our watchers, I would genuinely just love to know your feedback and what you think about the chapter so far. So I would give Mike's questions to you, because at the end of the day, we are here for you, and this is a form of service for us. So actually your feedback is more important necessarily than what we think. So what did you like? What did you discover in the deep dive? And as Mike said, what would you want us to change, if anything? What would you alter? What would you like to hear? And what are you looking forward to in the chapters to come? There's many more chapters, which is very exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to more revelations, more learning. I love learning. If you know me, I love learning. So this is like, this is soul food for me. So yeah, it is, as Frank said, it's a real blessing to be here and to keep learning and growing and having those revelations with you. So thank you for having me here. Yeah.
Just one quick one, very beautifully said, Lauren. Thank you for that. Inspiring for us old timers. One thing, when you do feedback on our comments, etc., please add emails. Please be aware that we're some episodes ahead, so we can't implement feedback straight away. Or even if we do, you won't notice it for at the time of recording 5 episodes ahead we are currently, so you won't notice it straight away. But rest assured, we are certainly paying attention, and we will, where appropriate, change the course of our podcast.
Absolutely. Like Lauren said so nicely, that I think we all do. We all love learning, and so we all want to make this podcast the best that it can be. And we have wrapped up chapter 1 now, and we're looking forward to chapter 2 in our next episode. Chris, do you want to give us a slight teaser of what we're going to see there?
I'll say that we have 3 topics: a wedding.
What's the title is My Mother's Death and the Mystic Amulet.
It gives a lot away.
Chapter 2, of course. We're on to next chapter, first episode. And the topics that we'll cover is a wedding, a vision, and a tragedy.
Looking forward to that.
4 weddings and a funeral, Mike said.
Something like that. Yeah. There's a funeral, unfortunately. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for our listeners and people who watch it on YouTube. And Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.